Hello, and welcome to Guilty Pleasures, the show where we dive into pleasure, chumming the waters of a modern horror film to find out just how guilty we need to feel about loving or hating it. It was my pick this month, and I wanted to say farewell to summer by swimming with the sharks. We asked our adoring fans to choose between the underseen 2012 shark horror Bait and the 2018 mega hit Meg. In our closest online vote yet, Bait took a bite out of Meg to seal a narrow victory. So buckle up, boys and girls, as we start the show and find out if Bait is a killer pleasure or a guilty sin better left on the hook. Before we dive in, my name is Stephanie, and I'll be your captain for the next hour. I'm joined by your scuba instructor, Kelly, and surf sensation, Jack. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to flood us with the details on this month's featured film. Kelly, take it away.
As your scuba instructor, I apologize in advance for how few of you will survive this trip. Finding information about Bait was a little challenging, not because it wasn't out there, but because it turns out there are quite a few movies called Bait. I found 10, and that's not including the ones that have the before Bait. But I found the information eventually about this little Australian piece of work. It was released in 2012 and directed by Kimball Rendell. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And if you are listening, Kimball, I apologize if not. The budget was $20 million and the box office was $32.5 million. So this movie made some money. It's not swimming in it, but it made some, pun intended. It kind of went right down the middle for reviews. The Rotten Tomatoes is 46%. The IMDb comes in at 5.2 and the Letterboxd is 2.5. So in general, this was really your C average student. That's pretty much what I've got on it. I have one other little thing that Jack might cover, so I don't want to say it and steal his thunder. I'm throwing it back to you, Captain. Ahoy.
You know, it's funny that you said there's so many Bait movies because when I was watching, I literally had this moment of what if they watched the wrong one? Wouldn't that be hilarious if you start talking about this movie, you're like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, one of them is I think it's a Danish drama. That actually sounds really amazing, but it would have been a very, very different conversation.
Oh my God, that's amazing. All right, so before we get into our overall thoughts and impressions, we, being the consummate professionals we are, like to dig a little deeper and see if there are any fascinating facts or BTS intrigue about our film to share with our listeners. And this is where we turn it over to Jack for the 411.
Hey guys. So doing some digging on this one, seeing as how it is a Australian film, not a lot of draw, I guess, for American audiences, but one of the main cast, Josh Xavier Samuel, was in the Twilight Saga Eclipse, apparently. So there's that. He was also in Blonde, which was on Netflix, which got a lot of attention, although probably not for the right reasons. Outside of that, it's a lot of kind of, I don't say bit actors, but it's a lot of Canadian, what the hell am I talking about? Australian actors that are in movies that tend to come from, that region of the world. So I didn't see anything too much. We had a gal, Jamie, another one of the main characters. She plays, Phoebe Tonkin plays Jamie, and she was in The Vampire Diaries, of all things, as one of the casts. So there's that. Sharni Vinson, she plays Tina in the movie. She's actually been in quite a few things. I've seen her in other movies. She was in You're Next, which I thought was kind of cool. She was also in the Step Up movies, if, that's your jam. And then Julian McMahon, he plays Doyle. He's one of the erstwhile, I suppose, or supposed villains of the movie. You've actually seen him in quite a bit of side projects. He's kind of always this character actor. He was in Nip Tuck. He was in Charmed. He was in the Fantastic Four movie back from 2005. He was even in that movie with Sandra Bullock called Premonition. So you've seen him. You've definitely seen his face. As soon as you see him on screen, you're like, oh, that guy. And yeah, it's that guy.
That's awesome. I do want to add one thing. So when I was watching this, the main guy you talked about who was in Twilight, when I was watching it the whole time, I was like, where the hell do I know this guy from? He looks so familiar. I can't place him. Who is he? Does he just look like somebody? Then I looked him up and he was in The Loved Ones. And I don't know if you guys have seen that. but it's such a fucking good movie. Yes.
Is that the one with the girl with the like prom or some sort of a dance? Oh my God, that movie's wild. It's so good, but it's wild.
It's so good. And oh my God, Jack, we might have to cover it. It's once I figured that out, I was like, because he looks quite a bit different in the Loved Ones, like totally different hair and stuff. But I was like, oh, holy shit. And it made me watch the film in a whole different way. Jack, you're going to have to watch that movie.
It's definitely worth watching. Just maybe do it on an empty stomach.
Gotcha.
That's a rave review if I ever heard one. Every time somebody says that, I'm like, yes.
Do it on it, yep.
And we are at the fun part now, where we get to get into this guilty pleasure and figure out if it is, in fact, both guilty and a pleasure. So we're going to start, as we always do, with our overall impressions and any particular highlights or lowlights, if you will, that stood out to each of us. Now, does anyone particularly want to go first as we talk about this film?
It was your pick, Steph. I think you get to start us off.
Start us off by telling you which one of you guys are going to go first.
Sure.
We can do it
I'll
that
take
way.
one for the team. I'll be the chum in the water. That's fine. I'll do it this time.
All right. Yeah. Be the chum and let's bait some sharks.
I'm when I was a kid and when my Jaws had just come out or had recently come out, I remember my father watching it. I don't remember much about my dad, but I remember this very clearly, that he was watching it with his wife out on the couch. And I couldn't sleep. I don't know how old I was, mind you, but I couldn't sleep. And I was like creeping down the hall to find out what they were watching. And I remember peeking around the corner and like I think I probably caught like maybe 20, 25 minutes of Jaws, and that movie scarred me for life. We were always out in the ocean. We lived near we lived like by Huntington Beach. We were always out on the ocean. And like ever since then, I've had this just bizarre little worry. I mean, I guess it's probably not bizarre. I guess everybody was like afraid of sharks, but even in lakes, even in swimming pools, I was always like, oh, what happens if the shark comes through the fucking concrete and gets me? It was the dumbest thing, but that movie stuck with me. So I think I've always had this like draw towards shark movies just because a lot of things don't get to me, but that one, probably because I was so young, it has stuck with me. So like I was going into this really hopeful that it would kind of bring the terror back because, our other option, The Meg, was not a terrifying movie. It's more of Jason Statham punching sharks, basically, or near enough to it. So it was more action oriented, where this one was like, okay, you've got a cast of everyman's, they're not superheroes. They're not Jason Statham. They're stuck in this supermarket with sharks. I thought this could be good. And I was not terribly disappointed. I guess it was kind of what I thought it was going to be. It was a movie I expected to get. I don't know. Like, I think again, we talk about swings and misses, or we talk about, swinging for the fences. And I think there were times in this movie where they definitely did a swing and a miss. But I think overall, like, this was the movie that they were looking to make. It's never been really done before, I suppose. There are moments of it, I guess, in Deep Blue Sea or whatever, where there's kind of similarities. But I mean, this tsunami bringing in sharks into this underground shopping center was kind of cool because it's like, hey, sharks in a shopping center. That's kind of neat. And so aside from some of the silly aspects, and then I don't know about you guys, but I did struggle a little bit as the movie went on, and it kind of jumped the shark, and it really changed the tone of the film, because then right near the end, it turned into Die Hard for a minute. And that was kind of odd. And it kind of goes to these feel good places for a moment. So it was like soap opera sharks, I guess. But overall, this is what I expected to get. So I wasn't terribly disappointed.
Two things before Kelly, you go. So Kelly, you know how you always are like, when we talk, you're like, I'm punching the air, just waiting to say things. I can hear you doing that while Jack's talking. Like, you're not saying a word, but I can hear the energy. It's weird. And the second thing is, Jack, I loved, this is going to be a fun one because I loved your little intro, because you're just like, I mean, it was a movie and stuff happened and it was fine. And I'm like, oh boy, the enthusiasm that we're getting is intense. So Kelly, I sort of, you a little bit gave a little teaser of how you felt about this. And before we start, just to confirm, both of you guys, this is a first time watch, right?
Correct.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I dare say a last time watch.
Okay, well, let's talk about that.
Well, I also want to comment a little bit on Jack's review because my mom and I have this running joke that when something's like not really a compliment, it's just a really flat statement. I don't know if you guys have seen the episode of The Simpsons where Krusty is endorsing the Rib Witch and he just says, "I don't mind the taste." I feel like Jack just gave this movie the "I don't mind the taste" of reviews. I'm going to rip off the obvious Jaws Band-Aid because like we're not going to be able to get through this episode without all of us, I think, acknowledging the Jaws of it all. I fucking love Jaws. I know that's like the least controversial statement anybody can make. Almost everybody loves Jaws, I think. And Jaws is this incredible movie where they show amazing restraint and how much they show the shark. You very rarely see it. And you don't care because so much of that movie actually hinges on the charming interplay between Dreyfus and Quint and, help me, guys. What's his name?
Chief Brody.
Yes. I was trying to think of the actor's name, but I couldn't quite think. Anyway, not important. I love that movie, but in every other shark movie, I just want to see the shark eat people. Like, it's all I'm going into it for. So I spent most of this movie just yelling, "Show us the shark! Give us more shark! Does this shark even want to eat people?" The answer was, I don't know. I don't know if the shark actually wanted to eat people or if it just kind of wanted to menace around, or both of them. Spoiler alert, there's two. I thought this movie was kind of dumb. I referred to it a few times as The Mist with Sharks because it reminded me a lot of like a, let us say, dollar store version of The Mist, but also with sharks. And usually I feel like the presence of sharks makes everything better. In this particular case, it just made me want to see sharks eat people. Because I did not particularly like any of these characters. They didn't really do anything for me. And full disclosure, I'm just going to put this one out there. I thought I spent the first half hour thinking two of the characters were actually the same character and he was just moving real fast.
I had that issue right immediately. Same thing.
Wait,
who
was
Fantastic.
Who did you get confused?
Those two like light brown haired white boys.
Yeah, the main character and then the other guy that works at the supermarket. Where he was like, yeah, same. I had that. I was like, wait, why is he hanging out with this other chick now? Like, what the hell just happened?
You guys are
it's two different people.
Right.
I don't know. My mom also said, didn't he just get fired? Why is he out with that girl now? And I was like, I thought the same thing. And then we were like, wait, they're different guys.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Without getting too deeply into my more refined notes, I will say that I went into this, and this is going to show my age, I immediately recognized Julian McMahon as a Nip Tuck guy because I watched the shit out of some Nip Tuck in my younger days.
It was Charmed for me. I was a Charmed girl hardcore. And so when I saw him, I was like, yes.
I actually thought he was pretty good in it. I didn't think any of the acting was bad. I just didn't think any of the characters were particularly developed in any
There's nothing about them to write home about, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. There's a potential. I say this every time and I'm always wrong. There's a potential this is our shortest episode yet because you guys are all like, I mean, it's a movie and things happened and it was fine.
Oh, I got notes.
Okay. Well, I have a few comments on your early introduction before I give mine. First of all, I think I was like writing down, I'm doing the count. This is going to be my episode where I'm the punching the air girl because spoiler alert, I have seen this film a few times. I picked it because I love it. I think it's underrated, and I wanted more people to hear about it and talk about it. And so as we were doing, I pulled a Kelly where I picked two films, and one of them I really wanted to talk about. And I sort of just knew, I was like, oh, they're not going to pick the one I want. But you guys came through for me and picked Bay. And I was very pleasantly surprised because when I posted, a lot of people, the voting was actually really neck and neck, but a lot of everybody that commented and reached out was a bait person. So like the bait people are really passionate. I think there's more people that obviously have seen Meg and enjoy Meg, but the people who have seen Bait tend to be like, it's one of those cult movies that they're like, holy shit, Bait. So I was very excited that my people came out for this. I think I don't want to get too much into like my summation. I think it's wildly fun. Like, but you noted that there were not enough sharks, and I felt like there was a lot of shark action.
There's a lot of shark in this movie.
Like, I was kind of surprised. Really, I thought that they really They used it more than you normally see in these kind of films.
It also didn't look very good.
Well,
I do have a couple of times written, "Holy God, that's an ugly shark. That's a really fake shark. That shark looks terrible."
That's interesting too, because I have comments about that. I don't want to get too detailed. You mentioned the mist with sharks, and when you say that, I'm like, sounds fucking awesome. Like, is it just me? Like, that sounds perfect.
It does. It wasn't.
I also enjoyed the characters. I thought they did a really good job. Like, I thought that they were pretty. I don't likable is a hard one because they're not all meant to be particularly likable, but definitely like enjoyable and fun. I thought it was a pretty diverse cast of characters, and I was fairly invested. For it being a stupid little shark movie that isn't trying to be like a serious drama by any means, and really is just about like cool effects and I'll air quote for you, but cool effects and like just a bunch of batshit crazy happening. I thought that the characters were pretty fun, and I thought that was a pretty strong cast for the most part. Even though it being like an Australian export, I recognized quite a few people. I'd see them in things, and I thought that it was pretty competently handled. I would never I'm not gonna, and we'll talk about this in detail. I'm not gonna be like, this is a masterpiece of filmmaking. I think it's really fun for what it is. I think it kind of does everything it sets out to do, and it's pretty memorable and it stands out. I watch a lot of shark films. I think we all do. I think we all have a similar obsession and passion for Jaws, and then are always kind of chasing that Jaws high and usually disappointed. It's a high that I've never quite ever reached with any shark film. But I think given the multitude of really mediocre shark films that are very forgettable, this one really stands out for me.
Every time one of these characters died, because I wanted to like the characters, I wanted to be invested in the characters. Every time one of them died, I couldn't help but say to myself in the Finding Nemo voice, like the shark bait, ooh-ha, because I was like, that's all they are, is like, that guy's shark bait. Oh, hey, that guy's shark. Oh, that chick's definitely shark bait. Like it was, I don't know, that to me was more fun than the characters themselves. I was like, okay, who's going to die next?
I think you're right. I think it kind of follows the rules of like a slasher sequel. Where in the first slasher movie, they actually take the time to make you care about the babysitter and her friends. And, you're like sad when Annie gets killed by Michael Myers. But in all of the subsequent ones, they're just kind of setting up a line of people who are going to get killed.
Yep.
And I think that this is kind of just a shark slasher in that way. And that what I thought they actually did do pretty well was that I was pretty okay with all of these characters getting eaten by a shark, except for the dog. I felt like, I'll be cool with seeing you get eaten by a shark. That'll be fun. I'm down for that.
And again, I think saying this is like a shark slasher, again, just like makes my heart happy. Like if you say that to me, I'm like, yes, please sign me up. Like what's the problem here? That sounds fantastic. I love to see a big great white shark just munching on people left and right. And it is fun when you don't really give a shit. You're just like, yes, more sharky death, please.
I think for me, I felt like the tone was a little bit off for that. And I really want to caveat this by saying, I have no higher ground to stand on here. I am a woman who watched The Pope's Exorcist yesterday, and guys, I had a fucking blast with it. Real stupid, real fun. So I am not coming at this from a soapbox at all. Please take everything I say as just a grain of salt. I think that the idea of this is pretty fun. I think the idea of being trapped in a grocery store with a shark is pretty fun. I just didn't think it leaned into the fun enough for me personally. The romance subplots did not work for me even a little. No, I felt I felt like throwing in this heist subplot just kind of, if you'll forgive the pun, muddied the water a little bit. The father and daughter stuff all felt a little bit maudlin and overwrought to me. So I think to me, it felt like they were throwing so many ideas, and there were quite a few writers on this movie. I should have written down how many, but there were quite a few writers involved in it.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's kind of what we're feeling. There are so many different contributions from so many different people, and to me, it just feels a little bit busy in a way that I can't get fully invested in any one storyline, except I did like the dog.
I think, and Jack, I want you to chime in too, but wrote down a comment because I think with shark movies, there's a problem with shark movies is that I feel like you're either Jaws or you're Sharknado. Like there's no in between. You're either
agreed.
like, you either have to be like super camp, super stupid, super ridiculous, like bad CGI, but up to the point where you lean into the bad CGI to where we're like, oh, that's fun how awful and shitty this looks. Or you actually try to be a serious, good, high quality shark movie. And you inevitably always fail because everyone across the board is always like, well, it's no Jaws. And then I always struggle with that because I'm like, what the fuck is Jaws? Like nothing is Jaws. Nothing will be Jaws. It's just a perfect film that you could never quite live up to. And
That's
so
the
I
tough
feel
thing
like,
about, Holy Grail.
I feel
That's the
like
tough thing
movies
about
like
it.
this, it's like, it's really, and I think it does a good job of being like, you know what, we're not Jaws. We're not trying to be Jaws. You know, this isn't supposed to be a stupid, stupid movie. This is supposed to be like mildly silly, but fun, competently made, like a movie that you're not like groaning the entire time it's on. But you're also not walking away going like, well, that was a masterpiece. And that's a really tough line to straddle. And I sort of give it props for knowing kind of that dichotomy and really trying to find its place in between those two extremes.
It's tough because like you'll see things and I can't remember where I've seen this. It's been in multiple things where they say, well, it's good, but it's no Citizen Kane. Well,
Right.
of course not. Right. So I do agree with you there. That's we do have to remember that there's certain movies that are the benchmark that things you can't ever top it because you're right. As soon as you try to go that route, as soon as you try to make a movie in that same vein, it will inevitably get compared to something that is the Holy Grail and it'll always fall short. So I think that does make it tough because if you are a genre filmmaker, what do? Do you try to chase that dream and land the big one, or do you go, well, I can't do that because I'll get lambasted even for trying and I'll fall short. So I go way to the other side, and it is tough though, because then those that do try to kind of thread that middle ground, I think tend to get overlooked because as horror fans, we want our movies really good or we want our movies really fucking terrible, so bad that they're good. And that, once you get into that murky middle ground, I think you lose a lot of exposure.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'm going to put a cap on myself here and say this is the last time I'll mention Jaws because otherwise I fear we could easily veer into becoming just a Jaws episode. But I think, and I truly mean this as praise for this movie, I don't think it's fair to compare shark movies at all to Jaws because I don't think Jaws really is a shark movie. I think Jaws is a movie about a small town and the dynamics in it and about the interesting interplay between three men that happens to have a shark as a catalyst. This is a shark movie. It's more along the lines of Deep Blue Sea or The Meg or any number of other films that are truly shark movies. Like the shark is the point of the movie, not just a kind of impetus and inciting incident, which I feel like Jaws is much more of a people movie that happens to have a shark moving those pieces around. There were certain things that I thought were really clever about this movie. I liked, I don't know what the character's name was or the actor's name was. I just referred to him as not Matthew Lillard.
Kyle, I think is who you're going
there you
for.
Go.
Yeah. I actually thought like his character had kind of a nice redemption arc that felt somewhat earned. And he actually made me laugh a few times. Like I thought he was pretty funny. And in a movie that didn't necessarily make me laugh as much as I would have liked it to for the fundamental silliness at its core, it was nice to have that kind of moment of levity that he brought, even though he got chomped.
Like when he takes his shirt off, I was like, dude, that guy is ripped to the point of like insanity. Like, 'cause they're all very pretty people who are in really good shape, but it was like bananas. And I kind of loved how they leaned into how beautiful everyone was, and they were all like in very
that was a little
clothing.
rough. Like, look, here's the supermarket, and it's all populated by literally nothing but like hot 20-something.
The gorgeous
There's
people,
like not a single overweight person or elderly person pushing a cart to be found. It's like, oh, is that how Australia really is? Okay.
Yeah,
it might be.
Australia
Who knows?
is.
It
They're
probably
pretty good
is.
looking there.
They're all
fucking hell.
supermodels.
I love it. I did write. Oh, I'm sorry, Steph. Go ahead.
Oh no, please go.
All I was going to say is I had a note that said they're throwing a lot of characters at us at one time and expecting us to keep them straight. And for me, like that was just a little bit of a problem because I felt like there's not a lot to distinguish these characters. And we know that our hero had this kind of tragic backstory, but that's all handled in about 30 seconds maybe of his brother-in-law or brother-in-law to be getting chomped up, and then like his fiance leaves and he's looking very tragic in a tank top, and then there's all of these other characters, and it just felt like this was throwing so many people at us at one time, all with very different stories that we're supposed to be able to keep straight. And I thought maybe it would have been better if they had kind of filtered them in a little bit slower, maybe, or just had less characters.
Yeah.
I did make a note that like first, one of the things I love about this film is that it is a little bonkers, and it is so like, it's so fast paced, and the action just keeps coming, and it's so much action, and it's so to the point of being ridiculous. Like the setup before they even get to the tsunami that kills a shit ton of people. The tsunami is actually pretty like fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the sharks, and you just have one fucking thing after another in this thing. But the way it starts, it's like, this is like the most chaotic day in the world. Like it's this little shopping market, this little grocery store in like a small coastal town that everything that you could have possibly imagine goes wrong all in this time span of just like an hour of like they're being held up, and then somebody gets killed, and it's just like, it's nutty, the setup. And then it's a giant tsunami out of nowhere, and then it's like killer sharks, and then it's like, oh, there's not just one killer shark, there's two killer sharks. It's just like, and then like they're going to be electrocuted, and it's just this, I think Kelly, you said this, it's like, it is stuffed with so much stuff. There's so much chaos happening from the get-go in this film that can be like a turnoff, but also is probably one of the reasons why I love it so much, because the plausibility is completely non-existent, but it's also like ridiculously fun.
I think Kelly mentioned it, and I agree. It's like, there was, and you talked about it too, but there's this heist element to it. And it's like, it really plays out in several moments. Like it really is going to be a heist film. There won't be any sharks to be found. Like when they're going down into the underground shopping or parking area. And then later on, like the main villain who shot the gal in the store is revealed to still be alive. Haha, he had a mask on somebody else. It was a red herring. And it's like all these elements are like, oh, like this could have just literally been a heist film taking place in some shopping, little shopping market. And yet there's also happens to be sharks in it. It is interesting how much they did throw at the wall here. But that like heist element especially like really shines through at times. And I think that's probably owing to how many writers there were on this. But
I would have restructured this movie completely just by having it start out with the heist thing and having them taking them hostage. And then that's the situation, that they have these people hostage when the tsunami hits and when the sharks come, because then you've established kind of like a reason for them all to be there. And you can kind of just slowly then reveal like the interpersonal tensions and dynamics. And I think then you've got like, it doesn't feel quite as loose to me then. Like you've got a through line, and you've got a reason for the heist, and you've got a reason that this disparate group of people need to share this space, and why I should give a fuck about any of them.
Agreed. Because that is the problem, is that cold open happens so fast that we don't know any of these people. We were kind of like, it sucks that dude got chomped, but we kind of don't care because we don't know who they are. Like all we know is that this chick has a butt he's staring at, and that also happens to be this other dude's sister, and then he dies. Like that's literally all that happens. And it's like, okay, that sucks, but I don't know them. I don't care about them. I think you're right. I think if we had kind of gone in there with the more high stakes situation, and then kind of done that 180 with the tsunami hitting and everybody freaking out, and then slowly unveil, I think that would have served the film a little better for sure.
I feel like, Kelly, you said something earlier that really, like, I wrote it down because I was like, this really is a very important point that you're making. When you said we shouldn't invoke Jaws because Jaws is not really a shark movie, at least not in the way that we talk about shark movies these days. Jaws is kind of first and foremost this like character drama, and it is about like, it's a survival film, right? It's about like man against nature, against the odds. Like it is, you're meant to give a shit. You're meant to be emotionally invested. You're meant to sort of put yourself in that situation because honestly, like I love the ocean. Sharks are fucking terrifying. Like I love sharks too. I have a great affinity for them. But if I was like coming face to face with one and it was wanting to eat me, that would be a pretty terrifying experience. And I think a movie like Shallows, for example, does a really good job of tapping into that aspect of the actual drama and pathos and terror of that situation. But that is another film where it's not very sharky. It is mostly it's a survival horror. It's like you have got to escape the elements. You've got to get out of the situation. This is a shark movie where it's like, we want to have fun and we want to see killer sharks who are just super excited about eating a bunch of people. And people that we care about just enough to watch and not be bored and to sort of like have some tension, but not so much that we still don't want to see people getting eaten left and right. And I think a lot of what you're talking about like would make this a better dramatic movie and is somewhat more investing on a like, okay, I want to be invested in the characters and I want to like understand their plight and I want to sort of, have some empathy and all that stuff. Whereas this film is like, I mean, and that cold opening is all about like, I want to get your attention right away. I want to have this be kind of big and splashy, maybe even a little bit silly. I want to invoke Jaws just enough to be like, okay, like we get what our inspiration is here. And then we just want to like get to the nuttiness and just have some fun. And that's why it's a very chaotic and it's very messy and it's very stupid. And it's all this, like, if you say all these things, I'm not going to argue with you and be like, no, you're wrong. But I also think that I kind of love that it's all that. Like that to me makes this a really fun film as opposed to a really good film.
I think that's fair. I 100% see what you're saying. And I agree with you in theory. I don't know that I felt like the writers did, simply because I felt like they put in enough elements that felt like, we're making a movie, not just, a shark feeding film. That like, it felt to me like at least one of those writers was like, no, this has to actually like be a movie, guys. It has to have like, a plot and characters who you give a shit about. And sometimes that just came across so unspeakably badly. Like when the very good looking boyfriend she comes back from Singapore with, like pulls good looking but forgettable white guy aside and is like, she never really loved me. It was always you, bro. And now I'm going to sacrifice myself so you can like be with the hot chick. Like I was like, this feels so like bonkers to me to actually have him say like, she never loved me. I'll do it. I'll sacrifice myself to the shark. I know he doesn't say that, but like I wrote well before he died, this guy's about to sacrifice himself.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Like it's so obvious. Although I also wrote right briefly after that, is this shark racist? Because I feel like, wasn't it all of the first people to be eaten were Asian?
Well, the store man.
Or am I forgetting?
Well, I don't know. Is it the same shark as the beginning? Who the hell knows?
I don't think that's the same shark, Jack.
It should be.
I mean, that would be amazing.
Movie,
That would be much funnier to me if, like,
right?
The shark remembered him and he was like, "You got away last time, motherfucker."
Yeah.
You thought you could escape my claw jaws?
I can come on land and get you, bitch. Yep.
I think that shark may be the same shark that's in the very last scene, which is
the one that
also ridiculously stupid. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point, Kelly, because it was tonally all over the map, because there were moments where it was almost like this Lifetime melodrama, like what the fuck is happening here? Why are we devolving into like we need to air all of our emotional dirty laundry when we're trying to survive, and then it goes to this feel good piece where everybody's trying to pump each other up, and then like it literally goes Die Hard at the end where forgettable white guy number one is now all of a sudden an action hero and flipping around and hanging off of things with guns. And it's like, wait, what the, like if it had just stayed as a shark film, man against, these people trying to get out of this supermarket with the normal amount of creativity and using what's around them, which I want to get to that too, the whole shopping cart exoskeleton thing at some point, but like that would have been better. I think it is, maybe it is because there's so many writers. It just tonally pinballs all over the place, and it's like, now what movie is it right now?
I have a note that says Josh's Rambo ?
Mhm.
And that
Yeah.
I think in a way I would have maybe enjoyed more of that, just that kind of silliness of a man versus a shark, like straight up punching sharks and just shooting sharks with guns that probably wouldn't work underwater.
Well, then they would need Statham in this movie and not the Meg. You know?
And I had so much fun with that movie.
We need Statham in literally every movie. Can we agree on that?
Yes,
Yes.
no argument.
That
It was really nice seeing him have fun again.
I know we're going to potentially banter a little bit about Meg in our after show, but holy shit, I love that man. I just need to point that out.
Well, and I think watching them back to back like I did,
Me too.
Really,
Same.
It really drew out how much of a difference having somebody with his kind of charisma can make in these kinds of movies. Because I don't know that truly writing wise, the Meg is much better than Bait is, but he has so much charm.
Yes.
And so much presence, and he's funny and likable and just like easy on screen. And you're like, oh, I just want to watch him.
But the Meg also knows exactly what kind of movie it's trying to be and doesn't try
That's
to
true.
be anything other than. It's like, hey, this is going to be a big, dumb, action-filled summer blockbuster shark movie, and it's like goes all in.
And it's a pretty streamlined plot.
Yeah, it is. It's very streamlined. Yeah. Where this one again zigzags all over the place, which they're trying to touch on every little thing, which I can commend that, and great job for trying to expand the scope of a shark movie, but you kind of expanded a little too far, guys.
I know I'm nutty, but I kind of love the idea. Like, it sort of charms me to imagine, like we talked about, there's 6. I think it's 6. I'm overinflating that a little bit, but let's say 6 writers. It was a shit ton. I remember that. Like more
6.
than a normal amount.
Right.
Yeah. And automatically,
it feels like 6.
That's usually a huge red flag when you see that many writers are like, this isn't gonna be a
That's
chore.
a lot of cooks.
But I kind of love the idea of them each going off in separate corners, not talking, not like having a writer's room, but just being like, all right, you go write the love story, you go write the heist aspect, you go write the like action adventure aspect, you go write the like shark kills. And they all just sort of like had a piece of the puzzle and went off and wrote it without any sort of dialogue, then came back and just like mashed it all together and we're like, this is fine. And I don't know, like, I know that's ridiculous. It sounds awful, but like to me, that's also like wildly fun and kind of giddy. I think there's something wrong with me.
No, it's the exquisite corpse. It's basically, you're saying it feels like they played exquisite corpse, and I agree. It does kind of feel like they played exquisite corpse, but the problem is the corpse, she ain't so exquisite. But it definitely has that feeling of like, okay, I'll write up to here, and then I'll give you just the last line of what I wrote, and then you write up to wherever, and then give just the last line of what you wrote to the next writer, and like keep going. And some parts of it work, and other parts of it don't. I think, especially to your point, Steph, some points of it feel much more ambitious than others. I have a note that says, are they attempting to make a clever comment on capitalism in this dumb movie? And I think, I can't remember anymore what I was even talking about, but like, I'm pretty sure that given that they said it in a grocery store, there probably was something that was said, at least, that was like, look at all this stuff people don't really need when they could just be getting eaten by sharks or something like that. And I think that there's room maybe for that movie to exist someday, and there's maybe room for a doomed romance set in the shark-infested waters of your local grocery store and a heist movie. But like, I just don't think that they mashed together in a way that, at least for me, worked.
I think we need to talk about some of the scenes in particular. Because I do think there is some, I don't know, there's some standout scenes. Now, whether you think they're standout in the good or bad way is definitely going to be, I think, up for debate on this show. But I know I have a few, but I don't want to monopolize given my like affection for this film. Do you guys have anything that stands out either in a particular bad or good way? Like, you love that scene. Okay, Jack, you go first then.
I absolutely love the fact that these people stuck on top of these aisle cabinetry and off top of these freezers and stuff can manage to whip together a shark cage exoskeleton suit in like 5 minutes from a bunch of rando shit that just happens to be laying around the shopping market, even though like somehow they like perfectly curve these metal shopping cart pieces around his body and have them all taped up with like foam. And then they somehow have this like 100-foot length of perfectly clear pipe that he's going to use as a breathing apparatus. You know, it was And then they've got like cans of food taped around his extremities to like ward off shark bites or something. And like, I just love it because it's like that was the part of the script. Whoever the 5-year-old that wrote this movie, whatever the 6 writers was the 5-year-old, that was his scene. And I fucking love it. And I wanted more of it because it ends on a kind of a rough note, but not shark related. You know, it's more of the, hey, this Asian character has to die so white guy can get the girl. You know, it's. Yikes. But I love the fact that they went all in on that and fucking actually did it and like put it on screen and had him like running through or moving through this underwater thing with the shark swimming by him, and he's in this fucking like handcrafted cage. But I was also kind of disappointed that they didn't do anything further with it. Like the shark kind of bangs up against him once and is like, you know, Asian guy. I don't know. Like it was just really disappointing because like you guys like went all in on this, like that you created this thing and you do nothing with it except use it to drown the guy. That was kind of sad. On the flip side, what I really fucking struggle with in movies like this and movies in general. I mean, I'm fine with stupidity. I love stupid movies, just fine. But if you're in the same scene, if your electrical panel that runs the entire fucking store is underwater, it's already electrocuting everybody in that room. Like that dangling wire that he's supposed to be going in and shutting off the main power supply to, like, that's not how that works. It's already underwater. They're already all dead, or it already blew a fuse and the transformer blew up and there's no power anymore. It doesn't work that way. And so it's like in these action movies, I think I reviewed one actually for MB where it was like dudes hiding behind a couch and they're shooting at him and the bullets are just impacting the couch and not going through. It's like, that does not happen. Like that patently cannot happen, you know? So again, stupidity in certain aspects, I can totally like, okay, you know what? Let's suspend disbelief for a minute and just go with it. But
do you know what
electrical panels underwater don't work like that? It's like, come on.
Do you know what I think really helps in my enjoyment of movies? Because, you know, I get accused of loving everything a lot, like to the point of ridiculousness. But I think it really helps that I am dumb. Like I'm like legitimately. No, seriously. Like I don't know shit about physics. I don't know shit about like how things are supposed to work. Like so
ignorance is bliss. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. I can suspend my disbelief and be like, this is fine. This is how
there's
this
probably
would be.
something
This is
to be
totally
said about
okay.
that. You know,
and it's
like,
amazing.
It is kind of tough watching action movies where it's like, you know, where I actually do shoot guns and have been around guns and I know how all that works. And I see these movies get everything wrong. And it's like, I'm just trying to enjoy this movie, but I can't help but criticize every fucking thing that they're doing. So I can see that.
I hear people talking about like, oh, the scope would be like left of center if this is you're gonna have this angle of shot and this. And I'm like, oh my God. Well, first of all, like props to you for knowing shit, but like it's so great that I don't know shit because I would never have a million years thought of that problem.
Fair enough.
I mean, to piggyback a little bit on what Jack said, and actually, I kind of feel like I split the difference between you guys because my thing is I don't mind if things are fantastic as long as they are true to the reality of the world you're creating. They don't need to be true to the reality of this world, just the world you're creating. And I think a lot of times for me, action movies are so heightened as it is that like, I don't care if you're shooting a gun wrong. However, if you accept that bullets go through people, then they have to also go through couches. So I'm fine with the reality of like, you don't have a scope and you aren't having the blowback or whatever. I don't like guns. But it has to also then go through the couch because like
consistency is good.
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I can enjoy some fantasy because like you're making up a world, but you have to follow the rules of your own creation. And I think that that's kind of the thing about the electricity that you're saying, Jack. Like, obviously, this movie is super heightened, and nobody is going to accuse it of being like a real piece of, you know, Veritas or anything like that. But if you are saying that electricity is a danger in any part, then you have to accept that it would be a danger at every part, and so it doesn't work within the reality you've created.
Kelly, I want to hear you talk about some of the scenes that stood out for you. But while we're on the subject of cinema verite, I need to ask, because I am dumb, I need to ask a serious, like, is this plausible question? So one of the, I think for me, like most like insane scenes comes very early on when the tsunami hits.
Mhm.
And I think probably because I'm such a disaster movie girl, like I love disaster movies so fucking much. And I know they're usually big and stupid and ridiculous and implausible and all those things, but I just love to see like things blowing up and, you know, earthquakes and buildings falling and giant waves hitting. And and I think natural disasters in real life are one of the most terrifying things in the world. But for some reason in cinema, I love to see it. And the tsunami scene on this is like, it's both insane because of like, because you are sort of aware of the awe-inspiring impact of nature, and this is a real thing, and tsunamis do exist, and they are super destructive and terrifying and all this stuff. So when you see a massive wave come and just sweep away the entire city, that's impressive on some level, just viscerally. But also it's CGI, and it's comically CGI, and to the point where it looks
so bad.
Fairly
it's
ridiculous. So it's like I'm laughing even though people are dying, even though I know that this is a real thing and pretty serious. And so I'm having all these conflicting emotions while I'm watching this scene. And then the tsunami comes in, and it comes into the supermarket. There's several people shopping and doing stuff. And everybody gets killed except for like kind of your handful of core characters that they've introduced. And my question for you guys is, why is it? Is there any sort of legitimate, plausible, scientific reason why everyone else dies in this massive wave, but like several people survive and they're totally fine?
Oh, because they're the best looking.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they're the
So beauty
sexiest of the
helps in
20-somethings in that
Yeah.
shopping
All
center.
right,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
okay.
If you're good looking, your odds go up considerably.
Yikes. Well, damn it. That's disappointing. And I didn't
Mother
realize
Nature is very
that.
shallow in that regard. You know, it's, yeah. Yeah.
Mother Nature's like, well, you got some ripped abs, so I'm gonna
Yeah, you
spare
got to
you.
shave, at least for a
All
while,
right.
you know, yeah.
You got a nice booty. All right, yeah, because I found that very, because they don't really show any sort of reason why, like they're in a different part of the store or something is different that makes survival more plausible. It's just everybody gets washed away. Almost 98% of them die, and these handful of people are like, I'm fine.
And incredibly luckily, 2 of those people are shark experts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then
This
at the end,
seems
did you watch-
statistically unlikely, but
like the ending of this movie kind of really, it's one of those like, yeah, because it's a movie, but everybody that leaves that shopping center, everybody that leaves either is a love interest, future love interest, or related. Every 2 people, you've got the father-daughter,
They're
you've
paired
got
off
the
in some
criminal
way,
and the stalker girl who are now going to be like, now they're an item. You've got white boy and his girlfriend again. Like everybody that walks out of there is like paired up with somebody, and it's like, yeah, it's one of those. This is of course because it's movie, because you know that's only happens in movies. You know that I was just kind of shaking my head, like you know it. Again,
So,
you couldn't go all in with the carnage. You had to make sure that you know all these people survived. You know.
So Mother Nature is shallow and likes pretty people, but also is sentimental and
She
appreciates
is
relationships.
Yeah, if you're related,
She's a
you're
romantic.
probably going to survive
I like
with your other
her.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a hot girl. It's like hot girl summer. Mother Nature.
Well, except for that poor nice boy from who came back with the main girl from Singapore. She was like,
you
"Fuck
guys-
you, you're not the lead."
Well,
You
yeah, but
guys
he
really
never, but she
made
never really loved him, and Mother Nature knew
Yeah.
that. You know, so,
I could not
yeah.
believe they actually had him say that. I truly I plotzed when he pulled him aside and was like, you know, she never really was into me. Sorry.
That's such a thing in fiction too. I've read so many articles on that in fiction. There's probably a thing in movies too, where it's like, oh, here's this racially different character that is their only inclusion in the story is to heroically or not heroically sacrifice themselves to further the main character's plot line. And it's like, oh my God, like you see it all the time, read it all the time, but it's like, this was one of the most egregious examples of that, I think, because like he openly admits it, like he identifies it and then goes off and does exactly that. He literally sacrifices himself. It's like, oh, Jesus.
It is truly as close as I have ever seen a character in a movie coming to saying, I am a plot device, so my time's up. Let me go in the shark cage.
Yep.
Oh, damn. See,
Yeah.
you guys this is the danger of this podcast, is that I have sort of unabashed love for this film. And now it's like getting tainted because you're like, well, and then the Asian
We're
guy
slowly
has to die for the
deconstructing
white
it.
guy. And I'm like, no, you are, in a way that's really making me have the icks. And I'm,
Oh, Well,
It's
I mean, to
sad.
be clear, like there are plenty of movies I love that have like stupid problematic elements that I wish they didn't,
Same.
and it doesn't change the fact that I still love those movies. Like, I think we all like what we like, and doesn't mean we think it's perfect. We didn't write it. We're just enjoying the sharks chomping on people.
Yep.
We weren't one of the 23 writers on this, sadly.
No, we were not.
Or if we were, we're not getting any of those residuals.
Or we wouldn't admit it if we were. So.
I don't think anybody's getting residuals, so.
Kelly, I want to hear your scenes, girl.
Girl?
Oh, boy. All right. Not too many really, to be honest, stood out for me. I have more of like impressions. One of them, and this is not unique to this movie. I want to be really clear. I'm not just sapping this movie for it. It's something I hate that all movies that do it do, and a lot of movies do it. Having their 24-year-old teenage girl immediately establish herself as like really obnoxious and unlikable, and then in like 5 minutes, like her and her estranged parent, like through trauma, are reunited, and they completely abandon all of those obnoxious personality features.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like she doesn't need to be that annoying in the beginning. There's a way to like introduce her as troubled or whatever, but she's such a dick. But then you are expected to forget that like almost immediately.
Yeah.
And but again, not unique to this movie. A lot of, especially like horror movies do that with female characters who are supposed to be teenagers. I'm not saying they actually are teenagers, because they are definitely not. But, that was something that kind of pissed me off a little bit, just because I hate seeing that in any movie. Not unique to this. I thought it was a little disappointing that the way he killed one of the sharks was just by shooting it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in any kind of like man versus shark movie, I want a little bit more than just, what if I shot the shark? I feel like a shark deserves a better death than that. But I did like not Matthew Lillard, and I kind of thought that I kind of would have liked the movie to have just been them in the parking garage. I thought that could have been really interesting. Just these three people trying to survive in the parking garage with no available exits, and just kind of like, I think you can make a pretty compelling survival movie that doesn't have all of these extra things thrown at it, that are just the act of surviving difficult and borderline impossible circumstances. I also thought that there was some humor in that. I did think it was a little bit disturbing when that girl said that dog murder is worse than people murder, but
I love that scene. I wrote that down. I was like, girl, you know it.
I guess in the lines of things that made me the craziest, and please feel free to judge me for this, having the wild card be named Kirby made me insane. It was like, you can't have your dangerous wild card be named Kirby. That's the name of a pink cream puff. That's not a madman's name.
It's Australia, though. I don't know if the same rules apply.
The rules don't apply.
I don't know. I just like kept screaming, Kirby? His name is Kirby, for like 30 seconds straight, until my mother said, shut up. Yes, his name is Kirby.
Did anybody else have a problem with how many people were parkouring off of the things? Like,
oh my God,
every 5 minutes, somebody was fucking ejection seating into the water, like so over the top, like, like what the fuck is happening here? Like, yeah, it was one of those things where it's like, I 100%. Guess that generate that false tension, and it's like, okay, now you're just really being stupid, like that. If they fell in because of something, they slipped, or they're trying to help somebody, but literally they like fly up and over and onto their backs. And it happens a lot. Like, it happens. Like, it should be a drinking game for how many times fucking people like fly off into the water in this movie.
Okay, something I did like was when the guy was trying to climb to the vents, and he was like, zip lining sort of, and the shark came out of the water and just like chomped him up. But that was what inspired us to say, is this shark racist? Because in the parking garage, the guy does the same thing and the shark doesn't chomp him. So we were like, wait, is he only going after, certain ethnicities, or?
But only if they're not caged up, because if you got a cage on you, then it just totally ignores you.
Yeah, then you get the stupidest death in the movie.
That was pretty terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yikes. I did not think I was going to be speechless talking about this film. You guys have disarmed me a little bit.
Can we go back to that real quick? I want to go back to that because that is a pretty dumb. It's a pretty terrible death in that movie, and it's a pretty shitty way to go. That you're weighed down by all this stuff, so you die because you're weighed down by your homemade, shark armor. But didn't main character also kind of kill him because he let go of he let go of the tube. He took the tube off of his breathing thing and just let it go and and he's doing his thing. And white guy like pulls that tube back in, even though there's clearly no resistance on it whatsoever. He yanks that tube all the way back. Thereby totally taking away the thing that this dude could have potentially been breathing through again if he had just picked it back up and reconnected it once he was done switching off the underwater power.
It all depends on whether you choose to view that character as a person or, again, a plot device. Because, like, also, she's supposed to have had some sort of relationship with this guy, and she mourns him for, like, maybe 2 minutes, and then she's like, oh, hey.
I have that note that she cannot grieve for shit. Like, she does not, okay, I'm done. Like, that's that is all we get, you know? Okay, sorry, Steph.
I had such a wildly different experience watching this film. It's almost like comical to me right now. It's funny because that sort of like a homemade shopping cart armor scene is one of my favorites.
I actually agree with you.
Yeah,
I liked that scene.
Yeah,
I just didn't like how it ended.
Well, so I wrote. So first of all, like I think there's some ingenuity happening there. I think it's a very creative scene. I really like the aesthetic of it all. Jack, I think you talked about this. It just looks really fucking cool. And as implausible and stupid as it is, throw that out the window and you're like, this is kind of fun. I'm into it. I actually like the way he died. And the reason why I liked it is because I think it's fun when you have a movie like this where it's like shark just chomp, 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 all these people. And then you do a death that's like a little unpredictable. That's something a little different than what you would imagine. You know, you kind of expect people that are going down into the water and dealing with this, they're going to get eaten by a shark. And the way he dies, it does have some pathos. Like it's pretty kind of sad and tragic. I enjoyed it because I thought it was a nice like mix up of the way that people were dying and were going to continue to die, and something just is a little bit unexpected and has a little bit of like gravitas toward to it. Everything you guys are saying is absolutely like not incorrect, and you're making very good points, and you're making me like feel a little bit like, okay, Stephanie, why didn't you like experience any of this when you watched it? I guess I just had a different filter turned on when I watched it, but yeah, I really enjoyed that scene. It was a highlight for me. So I'm like,
well, I 100% think you're right, Steph, that it's supposed to have pathos. Like, I think it's supposed to, and maybe to me it would have if he hadn't literally just pulled the hero aside and been like,
right,
sorry that I dated your girl for a few years, but don't worry, she was just pretending I was you the whole time. You know, variations on that theme of like, they rendered him such a non-character.
Yeah.
And his death was so obvious and so inevitable that like, to make an odd comparison, maybe, I can't believe I'm giving Rennie Harlin this much credit, but in Deep Blue Sea, when Sam Jackson gives that speech and then the shark like cuts him off and eats him, you're shocked.
Yeah. Like
you're genuinely shocked in that moment because you're like, holy shit, that's not what I saw coming. This was telegraphed so loudly. Like you didn't know the exact way it was going to happen. You just knew he was not coming out of that water.
He was not getting out of that water. Yeah.
Exactly. And to me, like, I agree with you that it was nice that they switched up how they died a little bit, you know, that they, although I would have been perfectly happy to just watch sharks chomping their way through the entire time. I just felt like in this particular case, like it felt dumb to me. Also, I actually agree with you that I think that the best scenes and the ones that I enjoyed the most were the ones that were campy, that were like really silly and goofy and over the top. I just wanted the movie to be like all that. That was what I would have preferred if the whole thing had just been as goofy as some of those scenes managed to be. I thought that when the dog like floats up on that piece of wood, I was like, God damn it, yes. There's no reason in the world this dog should be alive and making this dramatic reentrance, but I fucking love it. I'm all in for this nonsense.
Speaking of, like, that was like so reminiscent of that scene in Meg. And this was first. I'm like, did they rip this movie off? Because it is almost it's like the exact same dog. It's almost the exact same beats. I was like, oh shit.
And this dog who's been yipping this whole time is like silent for the next half hour of this film. Like just doesn't say anything, doesn't bark, and then all of a sudden just like surfs on over, like, sup guys, you know, like yeah.
Oh my God. The moment when she opens the sunroof after they've been trying to get out of the car for like however long, and it's like, you knew you could do that the whole time? you've just spent so much time talking about how you can't get out of this car, and now you're just like, oh wait, by the way, sunroof.
I think you guys
it was so stupid, and I kind of loved it.
I didn't. I hated everything about both of those characters. I wanted both of them to die. Like, I could not stand them. They're
I enjoyed their
stupid and
nonsense.
entitled, and just watching that really toxic relationship. It was just like, oh, please make sure that they both get eaten. And he did, thankfully. And I really wanted her to get eaten too, because I was like, this
I mean,
chick
I'll
is
grant you,
dumb.
it's definitely not as healthy as the relationship between the two sharkologists who were separated by the trauma of a lost brother, but then came back together during the shark-related trauma in the grocery store when
Only
after
due
her
to Asian
boyfriend was
sacrifice,
died.
though. Don't
Yeah,
forget
exactly.
that. Yeah.
Not as healthy as that, but
Okay, so I feel like we're at that point. Before we answer the burning question, which I'm scared for about where this film ranks in the pantheon of guilty pleasures, and before we get to our wrap up, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you guys specifically want to make sure you call out? Do you feel like we've done this one to death and ready to move on?
I think we've covered pretty much what there is to cover.
Okay.
Jack?
I've got nothing else.
I've got nothing. All right, so that means that we're here. And it's time to say what we think. Is this film truly a guilty pleasure? Is it more guilt than pleasure? Where do we stand? Who wants to go first? I'm going to go last on this one, knowing that I'm going to have a wildly different opinion. But Kelly, do you want to hit this one first?
Sure, I'll go first.
All right.
I would say, yeah, I actually think this is a guilty pleasure. That might seem surprising given everything I said about it, but I don't have cable anymore, obviously. Does anybody? We all just stream now. But like, this is a movie that like, I have insomnia pretty badly. And if I were to like be flipping through channels and this movie would be on, I would 100% put it on in the background and just let it happen to me. I think it's like kind of the definition of I don't mind the taste. Like, it's not bad. There's nothing about it that offends me or anything like that. I spend a lot of time thinking about how it could be better, for certain. And it's not something I would actively seek out. But if I were, I don't know, at some sort of weird shark party and somebody was like, hey, y'all want to watch Bait? I think I'd be like, sure, why the fuck not? I'll get a little bit tipsy.
You need to invite me to that weird shark party.
Weird shark party.
I am there.
That needs to be on our 2024 bingo card.
We all wear those shark blankets that, you get to just like hop around in, and it's the best.
Yes.
So yeah, I would say, yeah, I think this is a guilty pleasure.
Wow. Well, that was surprising. That was a surprising summation. Jack, where are you falling on this?
Smack in the middle. Like, it's not guilty and it wasn't a pleasure. It was just kind of, okay, I watched it. Like I didn't hate it.
That happened to me.
It happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't hate it. I'm not getting that hour and a half of my life back, but I didn't hate it. There were parts of it that I really liked, and there were parts of it that I think, had there not been 27 writers on this movie, that they really could have honed in a little better on.
We keep upping the writer count. We're like, there's 6, and then there's 20, and then there's like 75. And
by the time we're done, it's just going to be all of Australia contributing.
Everybody wrote it. Everybody in Australia had a hand in this. But it was just, I think it was, Kelly said, too many cooks in the kitchen. And I think that is absolutely true. They threw so many things into this movie trying to appeal to everybody that it ended up, for me, just appealing not at all. Yeah.
This is going to be one of our nuttiest ones because, Kelly's like, it's not great, but I guess it's a guilty pleasure. Like, it's kind of fun. Jack's like, I'm really meh. Like, it's not guilty or pleasure. And then I'm going to be like, oh shit. Like, this is ultimate pleasure here. With just a little bit of guilt. I think this is a quintessential guilty pleasure. I think that it's got a lot going for it. It's got a clever concept. I really do enjoy the conceit of this film, whether you want to argue execution or not. I think the setting is really fun. I think it has an appealing cast. I know we've argued about that. It's got some fun, like, action escape, horror, disaster thrills. One thing about it is it's a lean 1 hour and 30 minutes, which is the perfect horror sweet spot for a film like this. It wastes no time getting into the action. It knows what it wants to do here, and it goes straight for the jugular. Now, it is absolutely absurd, but it's also an absolute B-movie blast, in my opinion. It's cheesy and campy, but I think it's a hell of a lot of fun. There's ample tension, some killer kill scenes with plenty of blood. For me, surprisingly decent effects, at least on the practical side, thanks to Stephen Boyle did like the prosthetics and shark designs. I think they actually look pretty good. I will say the digital effects get pretty hokey. And the scenes shot for 3D do not help anything, which is pretty much the norm when you do a film that you're intending to get 3D out of it. If you're watching it in dumb old 2D, it really is. You can absolutely point out like the stupidity of it all. Yes, the premise is outrageous, and you have to suspend a hell of a lot of disbelief, even if you're me and don't know anything. And it is certainly not high art. What it is, however, is for me, a fun night of escapism with a tasty beverage and some popcorn. If you're expecting anything more, it will almost surely not float your boat. It is a hell of a long way from the shores of Jaws, but it's the kind of waters I think you gleefully swim in. If you like films like Deep Blue Sea and 47 Meters Down, it's kind of got that vibe and energy. Plus, and here is a real bonus, guys. This is one of the few films, maybe the only film I've ever seen in horror, where only dudes get killed. Like, not a single lady bites it in this. And that's really freaking fun. And the cute dog survives. So extra bonus points. Guilty pleasure all the way. I really enjoy this film. I've seen it a few times and it's still pretty fun for me. So
You mentioned Deep Blue Sea, and I do feel like this movie would have greatly benefited from an end credits rap from LL Cool J.
well, I mean, again, this is like Statham. Like, wouldn't every film benefit from that?
Yes, absolutely it would. Yes.
Like Oppenheimer, you know, like it doesn't matter how serious or important the film is. I still want an LL Cool J rap at the end, and
Yes,
bloopers
100%.
and all kinds of nonsense. That's what credits are for.
Have a little fun. Get a little silly.
Poppy tunes, like just ridiculous. Just bring out the ridiculousness.
Agreed.
So before we sign off, we have a little teaser about next month's episode. And it was Jack's turn to pick this one. So I'm going to turn it over to him. I'm going to let him tell us what he's got in store for us. And just keep in mind, this is the first time Kelly and I are hearing this as well. So we are going to be surprised right along with you. Jack, what do you have for us?
So this was a tough one because I kind of wanted to my initial thought was, okay, we went to the depths of the ocean. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to take us out into space. We're going to do space horror. But then that funny thing happened on the way to the space station. And I actually came across what I think is a more enjoyable, kind of more divisive topic. So for our next picks, it is going to be horror movies set in World War II.
Ooh.
I have a soft spot for, I'm a war history kind of buff anyways, always have been. And I really kind of like it when films deign or dare to kind of go back to what was already, let's face it, a pretty horrific part of world history and kind of add these spins to it. So I'm not going to do the one I wanted to do, which was Overlord, because that one
would have been a no notes for me. Right,
same, and it's just too good. So I'm like, no, can't do that one. So our selections will be between 2020's Shadow in the Cloud with Chloe Grace Moretz and 2019's Blood Vessel with a whole bunch of people that aren't Chloe Grace Moretz. So,
all right. So if you want to be able to vote on those films and help us decide which one of those two we do talk about, you're going to want to make sure you're following us on one or more of our social channels. You can vote on, this is a Morbidly Beautiful podcast. So if you would like to keep up with the show and vote on our social channels there, we are morbidlybeautiful.com. Our social channels, we are going to include all of that in the show notes so you can figure out all the different places that you can follow us. You'll be able to vote on all of our platforms. Same thing for all of our personal platforms. You can follow us all individually. Hopefully that you will do that. We each post about these films. Sometimes the voting of these films often multiple times. So there's like multiple rounds of voting. So you have lots of opportunities to kind of chime in and help steer the course of the next episode. But that's our show, folks. If you liked what you heard, please consider liking, following us, rating and reviewing us, and generally just heaping on the love wherever you choose to listen. Also, highly encourage you to listen to what we're about to go into next, which is Afterglow. That is our after show where at varying lengths where we just basically talk a little bit more about anything that we didn't get to cover on this episode. We talk about the film that we didn't pick that we all watched and give our thoughts on that. And we just generally talk about our love of films, what we're watching, what we want to be watching, what kind of turns us on as cinephiles. So that's a really fun show. No rules, really informal. Highly encourage you to listen to that. Until next time, this is the Guilty Pleasures crew signing off and reminding you to give in to pleasure wherever you can. And don't you dare feel guilty about it. All right, guys, so buckle up. I'm gonna do this. And you guys are gonna be like rolling
Get your
your
life
eyes.
jackets on, everybody.